What are some of the top pros and cons of homeschooling? Stick around. That's what we're going to talk about today on the Parent Teacher Bridge. Hi, I'm Rebecca, and welcome to the Parent Teacher Bridge, where you can find the ideas and solutions you need to empower you to be your child's most influential teacher. Today, I'm going to talk about the pros and cons of homeschooling. Now, there can be many on either side, but we're just going to talk about 3 pros and 3 cons. So let's get started. Before we begin, make sure you click like and subscribe. And as I go along, write a comment below. And I usually try to get to those once a week. So hopefully I will hear from you on that. Number 1 pro of homeschooling is that you get more family time. You know, someone once sat down and figured this all up, and they took 180 days-ish of the school year that kids are in school times the number of hours each of those days, and they figured that if you homeschool your child all the way through, you get at least 16,000 extra hours with your child. So having more family time means that you are able to influence your child, their worldview, their work ethic, all of these things combined, and you are more able to enjoy your time with your kids. All that flexibility, if you want to prioritize work around the house, if you want to do your work in the evening, you can do that, but you have more time as a family together. In fact, that's one of the reasons why some people choose to homeschool. They may have one parent in the family with a different type of schedule, and the kids would never normally get to see that parent if they were stuck in a traditional school schedule. So more family time, who can argue with that? Pro number 2 is that you can customize your child's education. Instead of entering your child into a public or private school where you have no say-so over the curriculum, when you homeschool, you can choose it. If you don't like it, you can change it. You have all sorts of options. In fact, you probably have so many options that you might get overwhelmed. So I usually tell parents there's no such thing as a perfect curriculum. They can research the different curriculum options on YouTube, maybe watch some walkthroughs, talk to some different people, and just go ahead and make a decision and start trying it for that year. You can always adjust later. But, you know, if your child has a particular strength, you can channel that in homeschooling by choosing curriculum that works with that. If your child has a particular weakness and they need a little bit more time to learn to read or to learn to get abstract math concepts, you can give them that time and customize the curriculum that you are using, but not just the curriculum, but also your schedule. It is truly customized. There's nothing else like it. Pro number 3 is that you have greater influence on your child. We touched on this earlier when we were talking about more family time, but it really is true. If you are, like we said, choosing the books that your child reads, maybe doing some research and finding some recommended book lists from sources that you trust, reading those books with your kids, discussing those books with your kids, choosing what your kids will write about or do projects on, all of that is going to come into this great circle of influence that you have on your child. And that's not to say that you have to homeschool completely by yourself. What you're going to do is find groups of people that align with your way of thinking or what you want. Find someone that may be, you know, ahead of you by 10 to 15 years and see what they've done and what their results have been, and then you can get some advice from them. But you can have this wonderful influence over your children that normally you might have not been able to have. Going back to, you now have more family time. So those are 3 of the top pros of homeschooling that I have experienced. My children have always been homeschooled. Prior to that, I spent 12 years teaching in public and private schools. So I've seen both sides of it, with the exception that my own children have never been enrolled in traditional brick and mortar schools. So what about the cons? Well, they certainly exist. There are cons in every type of situation, but the cons in homeschooling, number 1 would be no built-in childcare. And this is the reason why some homeschool families choose a tutorial or some sort of hybrid school where they can drop their child off 1 or 2 days a week. It gives the parent time to run some errands and get some things done while their children are gone, or to spend time with younger siblings if the older siblings are already started into some academic work. They will choose that. If you are not involved in a group like that, then you may want to think about that before you jump into homeschooling. You'll still have a lot of time with your kids. You'll still be with your kids more than other people are, but you can have something where you drop your children off. If you don't have that, that's a con to many families in the area of homeschooling. If you've always sent your children to school ever since they were 5, you can get used to that idea of your children being gone and you going to take care of lots of different errands without having children with you. But when you homeschool, usually your young children are with you, unless you live next door to a good friend or a family member who's willing to babysit. That's what many of us homeschool moms have had to deal with. It's not the worst thing. You get used to it, and your children are definitely learning. Check out my other video on homeschooling. I will send a link in the description below, and I go into more depth on how your children are learning wherever you are. So the second con of homeschooling. The second con of homeschooling is that you need to arrange activities for your children to make friends. Now, some families are already in a great situation. You may have many children, so your children are playing with each other. You may live in a neighborhood where there are other families around and your children can make friends. You may have your children on a ball team or an extracurricular program, and they are getting their social fulfillment there and making friends and dealing with people and working on a team. You may also be going to a church somewhere where that need is being fulfilled. But if you do not have any of those situations that I just described, you are going to have to make sure that you arrange opportunities for your child to grow socially. That's not to say that if your child is in public or private school that they are getting the best socialization. In fact, they can get many negative influences and have an overall negative experience. However, if you want your child to be able to make friends and have memories with those friends, you do need to arrange some things. And that can get burdensome if you don't have something fall in your lap already, like a good co-op where the parents get together, the homeschool parents get together and the kids learn and play, or a tutorial where the parents drop their children off to learn for a while they go have a break. You don't have that. You're having to arrange that. Now that comes into play as your child gets into middle school and high school, because if you haven't established something already, it can be hard to create those situations where the children can make friends because they have an awkward stage that they go through. Now, for me personally, I have been involved in leading a tutorial just for kids in grades 7 through 12. I plan to do videos about that, but if you have a question about that, write it in the comments below and I'll try to address those questions in my next video. The third con to homeschooling is that you might be misunderstood. We've all heard these stories online from homeschool families where maybe their extended family or the grandparents of the kids didn't really understand why you were choosing to homeschool or how wonderful homeschool can be. So you may get misunderstood. Your child, if you're only homeschooling them, and even in the best scenarios, will turn out to be a little different than a typical child that has gone to school the entire time. If you're not okay with being different, you may not be okay with homeschooling. That's not to say all homeschoolers are the same. Most certainly they are not, because there are so many ways to customize the process. But there are some general trends that you see. One of them is homeschoolers are generally more comfortable in their own skin, tend to worry a little bit less about what other kids think. They tend to be fairly opinionated. Maybe they've talked about certain things with their parents and why they believe this or that. And so your child may stick out a little bit when they're in those mixed group environments. But I would say just make sure they have a good, healthy self-esteem and give them practice working with other people who may believe, think, and act differently. So the third con was you may be misunderstood. So can you think of any other pros and cons? I didn't want to get major long lists, so I only included 3 pros and 3 cons. And what would those be for you? What are you most worried about? A few people may be worried about the money situation, but what I have found from homeschool families now more than ever is that many parents choose an online work from home job, or if one parent works full-time and is able to take care of most of the bills, the second parent might do something on the side or part-time money. That would be where my family falls into. If I work full-time, I tend to feel like I'm neglecting some things with my own children. So if I work part-time, I could take that money and it can help us pay for some of the homeschool things that we choose to buy. Not that homeschooling is expensive in and of itself. It's that as your child gets older, the high school years cost a little bit more. I don't necessarily see a need for accepting government money because I like to have my own choices on what I buy and how I conduct my own homeschool. If I take government money to do that, that's going to affect that, as taxpayers want some sort of accountability for the money that they have sent in. So if you have any questions, write them in the comments below. If you think I left something out, add that as well. Remember, you are your child's most influential teacher.